Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed the very first video. In this series though, I'm going to be walking through different ways of improving your deck building, of thinking about, improving your decks, increasing power level and all of that stuff. So in this first episode of that is just going to be a quick run through of different tools to use while building decks. This is sort of referred to as netdecking, or ways of improving your deck using the internet. There is a risk to doing netdecking where, what you'll end up doing is finding the very sort of linear or one way of sort of playing a deck. But I'm going to show you how we can introduce a lot of variety in the way that we net deck. And I'm going to show you some of my preferred sort of tools to do this, and how I sort of then build out decks, like prove ideas, or like really think about my decks and sort of where I want to take them, see if it's even viable, like what is out there, right? All right, so let me go through a couple different tools, and I'm going to sort of show you the two main ones that I use. It's a little deceiving because the one tool that I use actually under the cover uses quite a number of things. But let's go through some of these things and look through them. All right, so the very first one, and this is probably the one that I first used a long time ago, it's been around for a while, is Tapped Out. Now, Tapped Out is a very excellent deck builder. It has like lots of different functionality, and there's lots of really cool things that you can look through. This is a nice way of sort of, digging in, finding all commander decks, so sort of looking through them and see sort of what has been thought about. You can very quickly see the ones that are sort of getting a lot of traction. This is one of the sort of deck builders that I see actually gets a lot of community feedback, so it is quite nice. I sometimes, when thinking about a deck, will come here, even still now, and enter my commander's name, and I'll look through like the top 20 most talked about decks, and then in those decks sort of draw out some ideas that I would really like. So this is, even though it's one of the older ones, and it does have issues every now and then where like the server will go down, it is one that is quite fun, and you'll see that it's sort of like up to date. There's a lot of new decks that are being entered into this tool. So Tapped Out, definitely one that I would consider. I've been using this for quite a while. I have a lot of like my old decks that I built quite a while ago. So this is my old Xenagos deck. It's quite nice. I can sort of keep it here. I can look at like what were the sort of cards that I had, and if I ever wanted to rebuild this deck again, it's quite easy to get back here and redo that again. So this is quite nice. All right. There's a couple other tools that sort of fit in this category, and I'm going to go through some of those real quick. Some of them are definitely more relevant in different places. So, and I'll get to one of those right now. So let's close this. Let's go to MTG Goldfish. Now, this is a tool that I use extensively with, finding prices for very specific sets, especially when I do evaluations for big collections. I'll use this tool, put in the set, and get very quickly what are the prices for the tabletop version. It also has a deck builder, which is quite nice, although this is one that I find is one of the harder ones to use. So you put in your deck, your name, the sort of format you want, the commander. It doesn't really give you visual representations of those things. So if I was to put in here, Lord of the Void, you'll click on that and add the card. You don't really get to see what it looks like or anything like that, right? So you just have to really know what your cards are. There's not a lot of ways of exploring that. You just sort of upload your deck, and that's what this tool does. There are ways of like sort of, being able to quickly buy this from different places, although, this is not relevant in South Africa, or probably many other places in the world as well. So if you're in the US, this is quite nice functionality to use. a card kingdom also has something which is very cool. So I bought cards from Card Kingdom before. It was very interesting getting them into South Africa. Had to go through a lot of hoops and things, but we're able to do it. This is also just like MTG Goldfish, which we've just looked at. It also has a way of like putting together a deck list, but isn't incredibly sort of easy to do such a thing. Their sort of card finder is a little bit better. So if I was to type here, Lord of the Void. This is just Grammarly searching for it. Find cards. You'll get a little bit of what it looks like. You can even see like they have a couple of versions of that specific card in the store. So if you shop through Card Kingdom, this is definitely a tool that is quite nice. You can quickly put together your deck list, or if you find a deck list that you really like, you can then drop that deck list in here and be able to pick up those cards. All right, then deckstats.net. This is quite a powerful deck builder, although it can get a little complex and a lot of their controls are a little finicky. So like for instance, I've added Omnath over here that you'll see like there's a lot of things that you can do. You can like sort of edit the card. You can sort of give it a lot of comments and things like that. You can sort of move it between different spaces, but all of these are like tiny little icons. It does give you a nice little view of what it is and give you some text summary of it. It has quite a big, nice sort of database. Just to go along with the theme, you can very quickly find the card and then just sort of move it in where you want it. A very interesting deck builder. Yeah, beyond that, it's just a nice way of gathering decks. It gives you a few different ways of like being able to move them between those different spaces. I like this one because you can sort of see what you're searching for. You can see, different ways of like narrowing down your filters and then bringing those things across. I use this for a little bit, not a whole bunch. Just leave here. All right, Aetherhub. This is another one where you can also build your sort of decks. This also gives you quite a nice view of the cards, so you can sort of go over them and then it brings it up so you can sort of see what they're saying, so if you wanted to read it. So this is quite nice because not everybody just knows the cards off their head, so you want to be able to read through some things and see what people are offering. All right, and the other one that I want to talk about is Archidekt. So Archidekt is one that a lot of my friends use. This is a hot contender for one of the better ones. So this, I would say, is like number 2 on my list of really good sort of deck builders. I was able to find, the new Linda, the Curse Commander, which I spoke about in the first episode a little bit. She's quite cool. I really like this mechanic that she sort of is bringing to the table, and it uses a sort of card type that I played with a little bit with the Mogus deck that I built out. So I quite like the idea of these curses. It can be quite fun. You build quite a deck that makes people quite salty, which is it brings out like a completely different play style. People also know what to expect exactly when they see the commander, which is quite cool. But this is just like an example of me going to that deck. You can very quickly see like the costing of the deck. You can sort of see like how like the sort of cards that are bringing some salt to the table. Like where do you sort of see it fitting? This also can come into the rule 0 conversation because you can bring up cards in that first little bit of the conversation of like, this is what I'm playing. These are some of the cards that you may not want to play against, right? So that's quite cool. I quite like that. So this is one that I've used quite a lot. I really like this like full sort of view of the card, and then being able to like dig into a card a little bit more, and you can see the prices. And if you really wanted to get a lot of sort of info on it, you can go and grab more information around it from that specific space. But you can also then just quickly move between the different cards and see the pricing if you wanted to get all of that. But I mean, this has been built quite nice. It is in a beta version. yes, I can't talk a whole bunch more of it because I used it just for a little bit and then moved on to my primary deck builder. Another honorable mention is Deckbox. Now, I know in South Africa we use this extensively for storing, sort of cards up for trade. A lot of stores use this, so having a Deckbox account is going to help you quite a lot if you are in South Africa. So this is, just a few cards that I've added from some of my decks, and then what I did is I just tried to see what the deck builder was like on this. Unless you have the paid version of this software, when you build up the deck, it does not add this to your inventory directly. You'd have to go for a paid version to do that. And the other negative from this tool is that after a little while, it kind of gets sluggish when adding new cards to the tool. So it is quite nice in the way it sort of breaks down the curve quite quickly. It gives you a lot of relevant information right up here at the top. And you can sort of see what sort of your CMC is. This is one of my very competitive decks, so you'll see it's really low mana curve, and you can sort of see how it's been broken down. I haven't added all my decks just because it became very tedious to do so, but this is a nice way of building up a trade list or a wish list and then being able to share those. And a lot of the time the sort of pricing that is placed, so if I was to quickly sort by price, you can see very quickly there's a dollar value, and a lot of people in South Africa treat that as quite a good representation of what that card is actually worth. And so when we do sort of sell cards or trade with cards, we will use that dollar value multiplied by a number that you feel comfortable with. So if the sort of exchange rate is 15 Rand for a single dollar, some people may want their full value, but in some cases when selling a deck like this, I may bring down dollar times 13 or 12 to sort of help it out the door because it's a lot of money. Great. So this is a cool tool, but not one that I extensively use because it's a little slow. All right, we're narrowing it down. So I've got a few tools up here. EDHREC. This is a fantastic tool. This is probably one of the most popular tools when netdecking, especially for commander. You sort of select the type of commander that you want to build, and it even gives you some really nice sort of views on different types of builds from a specific pairing. So I could pick, Ravos and Heidel and sort of see, okay, I want to see all the expensive versions of this deck, or select a specific theme. So you'll see here there's a couple of decks that are enchantment themed or some that are cycling themed. So this is quite nice because you may get a deck that actually can go many different ways. Rest in peace Golos, but this is quite a nice way of sort of seeing oh, this sort of pairing is quite strong in that specific way. And that's where sometimes netdecking looking at this pair, you could pretty much build whatever you wanted within those colors, really. But what they're showing you here are the really big themes that are going out here. And you may look at these numbers and say, well, actually cycling seems really good with this pairing, so let me build cycling, Heidel, and Ravos deck. And when you do that, it may not be the one that you end up really liking. So be careful when netdecking. Don't go all the way to sort of what other people are doing and strip a little bit of your originality. Those of you that have lots of money, you may be able to just be I want a really strong deck that competes at this table, so I'm just gonna find something that somebody's built and go from there. Where others may be looking at their file and sort of look through the cards that they have and say, okay, what will fit into this sort of space? This is quite nice just to sort of see, okay, this is the bigger themes, and then being able to draw from those themes. Let's go to enchantments, for instance. It's going to quickly refresh. And you may be able to go through this and quickly see, oh wow, 79 cents for Enchantress's Presence. I can get that if I don't have it, and it's reasonable. And if you have a lot of the other enchantments for this deck, it's a nice one to sort of sort of just add to your collection. So it's a really nice way of seeing high synergy cards with that pairing and their prices, so you can know, okay, there's going to be like, one or two really expensive cards, like there you go, Smothering Tide, it's $42. If you don't have it and you don't have the money to sort of splurge on that, fine, go for something else. And this sort of gives you like a really broad range of going and finding that. Even while using this tool, there are some really hard exceptions, right? So we have a small group where we build very budget versions of EDHREC. So I have one where the rules are every card in your deck except the commander needs to be 50 American cents or less. Doing that sort of a search on this tool can be quite hard. Not always, but it just becomes a little more tricky. What I would do is sort of switch the view. So instead of going there, you can see sort of the different pricings, and then instead of going the other way around, I would flip it so that the prices are under sort of 25 to 50, and then you can see, okay, all of those cards up here, those are ones I can afford to put in the deck because it's really cheap. And you may think like, wow, there's only that many cards that will fit in the deck at under 50 cents. And this is where this tool sort of doesn't become as powerful as some of the other tools that I'm going to show you just now, where we can like really find a ton of cards that will fit in your sort of range and have really good budget and sort of restrictions and things like that to make it so that you can build interesting decks with like a low, small budget. Cool. So yes, this is a very good tool, good for like sort of sniffing out what you want to build. I'm going to show you how we actually use this in something else. The other thing that you sort of want to need is a sort of way for searching for unique cards that people may not have already found or thought about, things that are very interesting, that are cheap, but if somebody else hasn't thought of that card or hasn't put it in one of those decks, out of all those services that I showed you now, it's going to be hard to actually dig that out, like especially with EDHREC. If somebody doesn't play that specific card, it's going to be very hard for you to sort of see it. So these are really good tools to have, and I would recommend that you have sort of a card search engine to sort of find those specifics. The one that I used for a long time was the Gatherer application. Being a programmer myself, it was quite easy to sort of mentally understand how this works. So if I wanted something like this, draw a card, you can make it and or and not. So and means that if you add multiple conditions, it needs to do both those conditions. So and draw a card, then you would say add, and it adds to the search criteria. And then I would say like color is blue. This is going to give me a lot of different things, right? So now I'm going to find blue cards that must contain draw and card. So when I search, it's going to now bring up a whole bunch of cards in blue that will have that phrase. And as you see there, because I've made it and blue, it will include other colors as well. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Now you're saying, I want to build another blue deck, like maybe braids. I only want to see mono blue. So you would have to go back here and sort of go back here and sort of exclude sort of things, and it becomes like a little more tricky to add those conditions. And the way that it sort of represented those cards, as you saw, was just in a single row. So it's a little bit more clunky. So one of the more relevant newer tools that has come out recently is Scryfall. And this is really powerful search engine. So I'm going to show you how it works. You can go to advanced search right over here. I'm going to show you something what I've just done, right? And they sort of laid it out in a very nice way. So I wanted to have, draw a card on it. I want it to be blue, and it must be exactly those colors. My commander is just blue. And what we can even do later on down here is to say like the price needs to be under 5. And you can even specify I want only rares that have that, right? And when you search for those options, now it will find all rare blue cards with draw a card or draw card as text that appears in that search engine. Just waiting for it to search. Boom. And there you go. Now, the nice thing with this is that it sort of displays those cards in like a nice matrix form. So, and it's the actual card in like a real big sense. So you can imagine you're a wizard and you're searching through your spell book as you normally do at your friendly LGS. You're looking at these cards as you were like looking in a file. And oftentimes, you know, it's not the wording, but maybe artwork that is stuck in your head when you're looking at a card. And you're like, oh, I know that card from somewhere I've seen it being played. I know they had a really good effect, or it was good in standard, or whatever. This sort of brings you to that space where you can then quickly find a card, what you're looking for, or something that may be interesting that you can then add into your space. And as you can see, because I've now searched for less than 50 cents, it's given me a huge selection of cards here. And even, in fact, like there's going to be a whole bunch more. So when building like really budget decks, powerful tool to use because you can add that pricing and it will go and sort of search for it. If I click on this, Quicksmith Spy, it will show you also multiple places from which the pricing, sort of different pricing points. So this is quite a cool tool to use. You can see where it's legal. It's probably like one of the most powerful sort of card searching engines. So I would recommend that you use Scryfall as your sort of like tool to dig into the cards and find the things that are going to speak to you. Very cool thing to use. Right. And we've sort of narrowed it down now to the three sort of tools that I use. Scryfall I use for pretty much building any deck, from extreme budget decks like I've spoken to like extreme cEDH with like really expensive cards as well. Very cool tool to use. Alright, speaking of cEDH, this is the cEDH deck list. I'm going to be dropping links to all of these tools in the description below so you can sort of look through them. But what this will do is list out all the cEDH decks. And when I was sort of playing with cEDH, it was very hard to find when we started cEDH, it was very hard to find like a tool that did this really well. And I was shown this by a friend. Shout out to Andrew if you're listening. This is a very cool tool, and as you can see, there are a huge number of commanders that could be in that cEDH bracket, which is very, very cool, and ones that may not completely break the bank. Some of them definitely are going to break the bank, but like a lot of the monocolored decks are really cool. I've built Marwyn, I've built Zavala, I've built EDHREC, I've built Urza. I've experimented with these because a large portion of the price can come from the price of the dual lands if you have those. The other nice thing is that if you click on like say Brago, you may find like just one single deck list, whereas if I go to like a Najila Tempo, you'll see that there are 3 different deck lists here with different sort of styles around building. Najila is a cEDH deck. So this is a really interesting way, if you're playing cEDH, to sort of see what is like other decks that you may be able to see at the table and sort of get a good sense to how they run. In fact, there's like entire Discord servers dedicated to specific decks, and I've sat on some of them just to sort of learn how some of these cEDH decks work and interesting lines that you can see. It's playing cEDH is a different mindset to playing casual Commander, because you're really, trying to find optimal ways and finding the best space to disrupt your opponents. So this is a nice tool to use. You can also then filter it down by the sort of, colors that you prefer. Also find decks that have primers or ones that have very good recommendations. So very nice tool. You can also submit a deck if you think that you have a deck that's not on this list that actually may, compete with a lot of these decks, which is nice. Okay, cool. So this is just an honorable mention, but if you're playing cEDH, this is probably going to be like a must in terms of like tooling. All right. And lastly, this is the tool that I've come to love and I use a lot. Just to make sure that this video doesn't go on forever, what I want to do is show you how I use this tool and why is it better than all of the other tools that I've shown you so far, in my opinion. There may be some of you that prefer some of those other decks, and that's cool. Like, that's why they're there. You can go and find one that speaks to you. Great. So I'm going to show you some of my decks. These are not all my decks, but these are some of them that I've been playing around with. Okay, so like Omnath is one that I haven't made public just yet. I'm still tinkering with this deck. It's a land-based deck. I played it a few times. It can be very degenerate. I've seen it drop like 20 to 30 lands on like turn 6. So you will be always ahead of the curve when it comes to landfall. It plays lots of effects where you can play additional lands and things like that. So you'll be playing multiple lands in a turn. Its big win con is like a finale of devastation, and you sort of buff up all your creatures and then swing for the win. Or Scoot Swarm to do crazy math, and you'll build millions and millions and millions of Scoot Swarm and then just take over the board. So that's sort of the two ways of winning with this deck. You see it plays a lot of lands. Okay, cool. I built this deck. The thing that I don't like about this deck, and in fact what I've come to not like about landfall, is that when you play a land, there's going to be like a series of triggers that then go off, and it becomes very difficult to manage all of those triggers, and it can actually take away from the play experience because you'll miss certain triggers, or you'll have such a huge stack of like triggers to go through that people just sit watching you sort of try to figure out how to resolve those, and you end up looking a bit like an idiot most of the time when playing this deck. So I think though Omnath plays to another sort of strength that I want to explore, and that is, yes, it does landfall triggers really well, but a lot of the other creatures that care about landfall, like Omnath and creatures like Rampaging Bailots and creatures or sort of artifacts like Felidar Retreat, they all sort of produce, tokens. And I thought to myself, a really fun sort of Omnath deck, maybe like Omnath that cares about lands, because Omnath himself really likes having multiple lands coming into play. But in reality, the thing that I really care about is either doing the first ability or the first and second ability where you get the additional mana. I'm not too phased actually with the last trigger where you have the third landing come in and then it deals 4 damage to each opponent in Planeswalker. That ability, even though it sort of is pretty good, it isn't where Omnath shines. Right, enough talking about this deck, let's build Omnath tokens. And I want to show you how we can do that like pretty quickly using Moxfield. Great, so let's create a new deck. It's going to be Omnath tokens. Let's go Math, locus of creation. I'm going to unlist it, which means it isn't available to everybody. If I share a link, somebody else can sort of see it. And no existing deck. All right. So what you'll find is a very empty space. Right. I'm going to show you 2 things that we can do. Right. Usually, how I start this thing off, I'm going to show you how you would do this for like maybe more of a cEDH sort of variation, or a very, very strong cEDH. It's going to seem like cheating here. It's going to seem like ultimate netdecking. There's little quick add options over here. Click on that. All right. Add cEDH stables. Just click that button. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Boom. We have 160 cards main board. Now what we do, sort of shave down from this, and you have a deck. Very, very quick to sort of, build out a cEDH deck. You'll see here 44 lands, pretty high. cEDH, even though it is Omnath. This is how you sort of get to like finding cEDH being very narrow by like its ways of building things, and so many cards are used in that database that it can become like very easy just to sort of slip into the same stuff, right? So you use that thing very wisely. All right. I mean, just do this for the sake of it. I'm not going to delete all those things. Omnath tokens part 2. It's going to be Omnath locus creation unlisted. Cool. So if you're building cEDH decks and you want to find like the most powerful cards, use that tool. Very quickly get all the lands that you need. You don't have to add them over and over. Great. Now, here comes quite a cool way of building decks. So let's say I want all cards that care about like token creation. So let's add a few. So like Omnath, and I want Rage. Right? He makes lots of cool tokens. I want to add Rampaging Baloths, also one that creates tokens. Let's add other things that care about tokens. Okay, doubling season, very expensive, I know. We can remove it later. What I'm trying to do now is inform some of the sort of cool stuff that's happening on Moxfield that I'm going this direction. Retreat. Some of the cards that you saw already had inside my actual existing deck, right? Now what we can do is, once we've got like a few of these cards in here, we're sort of let's see, add one more. Primal Vigor, similar to doubling season, far cheaper, right? Also adds additional tokens and the like. All right, now what we can do is in here, go down to EDHREC. It's all that we've already spoken about, right? Now what it will do is look at EDHREC and give us a whole bunch of suggestions of cards that we may want to add, right? And because we've already like sort of given it a little bit of information about the direction that we want to take this, we're going to find it's going to play into that quite nicely. And what we can do is just hit the add to main board. Oh, branching evolution. Fantastic. I like that card. Parallel lives. Also very, very cool one. If one or more tokens would be created under control, have that many +1. Epic. Under procession. Lots of doubling effects I'm already starting to see here. But like now, like sort of nitpick. Ooh, I really like Tender Shoot Dryad. That's a really cool one. Interesting. Maybe we can do Academy Manufacturer and add like Dockside Extortionist to give us like a bogus amount of treasures, you know? Zixtris is also like a very interesting commander that I would love to build. He might be also an interesting one to fit this build. But you'll then have to sort of forego some of the white cards and some of the cool blue stuff that's going in here. So what it's done is sort of narrowed it down to nodes that I want to go into like the token direction, and gives you really nice ways of quickly adding to the main board or to the sideboard or to the maybe board or considering section as you're going through this, and you're like, maybe Rishkar, I'll think about that later. Shaman, also like something I'll consider. Mael's Aria, that's something that I haven't seen played in a little while, so let me add that to main build. It may like sort of add some spice to it, and just within a few clicks, you know, it will start suggesting lands and things like that. Let's go back. I'm going to go quickly back to the deck list. You'll see that it's already starting to populate stuff. I want to go, back to the lightning bolt section, add sample lane base. And now I don't have to sort of go through here. I don't have dual lands, so I'll remove these quick. So just remove, and so on. Any deck that I feel is like a little bit too above my sort of budget. Now what I've done is got down to 29 lands. If I go back here to the EDHREC section, it may now suggest a few lands that I didn't have there before, because now that it can see that there's lands that may be missing. Field of the Dead, sure, that's a good card. Silver Library, I love card draw, and so on. So this is like a very nice way of being able to sort of, you know, describe your theme and then go into the sort of suggestions and nitpick. And now it's really like, okay, cool, I quite like Oracle. I want to still do these things. Having, you know, Omnath come out a turn earlier is great. Avenger of Zendikar does lots of stuff that I want to be doing anyways. Nice. Not a fan of Fierce Guardianship in this deck. I don't want it to be like sort of countery. You can go on. Ooh, IAC, yeah, I already have. Scoot Swarm. This is like the way that I traditionally sort of, well, net deck, right? It's getting like a really good sense as to what this deck could look like. Sorry, series popping up. And then build from there. And you'll very quickly see that within just the space of a few minutes, I've already built half the deck, or come up with an idea of what half the deck looks like, and be able to see the price of that deck. And see, okay, this is way over budget or way under budget. I would then also be using this sort of tooling where I think you can also restrict it to being more of a budget build if you really wanted to. Update to the cheapest, which will then find the cheapest versions of all these cards. So if I do that, you'll find like the Scoot Swarm will go down to a version that's the cheapest, and so on and so forth. So lots of very interesting tools and things in here, being able to buy the deck. Let me go back. I want to just demonstrate one thing that I really like about this as well. One last thing to wrap it up. All right, so I'm going to go to a deck that I've played quite a lot, a One Punch Man deck. It's Greven. This is sort of like in the sweet spot. It's not a very explosive deck. It may be, you know, end up killing one player very quickly, but it won't like just wipe the board. There is ways of doing that with something like a Chandra's Ignition, and if you do some interesting stuff, it can go crazy. But this is sort of the sweet spot for me. I usually sit between the $300 to $400 range with my decks. I have decks that are more expensive, but I have lots of decks that are also very cheap, much more cheaper than this. And it's because certain cards like Hatred have sort of spiked. I've had a Hatred for a long time, so it's not like I've gone out and splurged in here. And as you look at my lands, I have like really weak lands in here as well. I'm not like, you know, going crazy and getting blood crypts and things like that, which is not exactly crazy. But here's the cool thing: you get to sort of see your mana curve. You can sort of see which sort of things you'll have 100% chance of sort of serving there, and then you also get to see a demo hand. The sort of lands in my opening hand are 2.4 and an average. I can see there's a Mox Amber here. I can see there's a treasure map here. So I can definitely swamp Mox Amber. Can't use it that turn. Would I keep this? Probably not. So let's deal another hand. Okay, I see a swamp and a Cinder Barrens, 2 and a Terramorphic Expanse, and a Veshino Sand Sprinter, and a Loxodon Warhammer. Both of those are 3, Pyroclasms at 2. I may actually keep this hand. And so what you can do is Goldfish a few hands. See, okay, if I would keep like 2 out of 3 hands, I think it's in a pretty good space. And then you can also playtest it. You can sort of, you know, like add a land, and then next time it draws for you, add another land, and then I believe you push T when you're selecting a card. You can simulate a tap, play my card, next turn it untaps them for you. You know, Terramorphic, you would sort of like put that into your graveyard, draw a card, I will search for my library. I don't want to interrupt this video or videos over that, but you can also search through your library, find the specific cards, and then this gives you like a nice sense as to like, okay, this is how this deck plays. Even though you're not facing anybody specifically, I usually will Goldfish every one of my decks like 3 or 4 times. So having this functionality built into a deck building tool is really, really cool. I really like this. It's not something that's new. It's existed in a few other places, but just the fact that Moxfield does all of that other cool stuff, it links into other tools that I would like to use anyways, like EDHREC, and it uses, you know, easy ways of quickly adding mana bases and quickly way of like sort of exploring really high powered cards. This is like the tool for me. So this one in conjunction with this one, if I wanted to sort of find like more budget versions, I can just stick those very quickly into a deck that I would really like. Great. I hope this has been like a helpful video. I'm going to add all of these tools into the description below, as I've said. If you feel that this has been a valuable video for you, like, yeah, please hit the thumbs up, as in this is a great video, or share a comment about the thing that you learned from this video that you'd like to sort of play with. If there's something that I haven't covered that you felt would feel is like worth talking about, also add that to the comment section. I want to do some homework and figure out how to be better at this as well. So this is just the way that I play with this tool. I know that there's probably a lot of features that I'm not using 100%. You can also sort of like, you know, sort of follow specific people. It's a very cool tool. I've really enjoyed using Moxfield. I, in fact, even when looking at my decks, I even store all my files and like the cards that I have for trade. Probably not the best tool to do this sort of thing, but I thought it would be very nice to sort of represent what cards I have for trade in a nice visual way, so that people can see, okay, these are the versions that he has, this is the sort of lands, I'm looking for lands, these are the lands that he has, and so on and so forth. So quite a nice tool for this sort of thing as well, although not a lot of people sort of trust the prices on this, especially here in South Africa. They'd prefer something like a Deckbox where they have their cards stored. You want like a mutual sort of platform for that. So use multiple things to figure that out. But yeah, this is a very cool tool. I'd recommend you playing around with a little bit Moxfield. Get to learn a little bit more about Scryfall. It is very powerful. Like I would show you, like they have a really nice syntax guide. It is huge. Look how big this thing is. There's a lot of like little shortcuts to like sort of get the right color and things like that. In fact, if I go and search again for some of those things, you'll see that it quickly modifies in the top what I was actually looking for. So in this case, drawing cards is really nice, but like let's just find something that mentions land and it's in red, and let's make it sort of price less than $5 American. Search with these options. Maybe I should have added a rarity, but at the top here you can see the sort of language that it's used to identify these cards. So you can modify this here, less than 5, and get like a different sort of search. Very, very cool tool. It also has like quite a nice like random section where it'll just find you a random card, and you can be like, I've never seen Deep Sea Servant. Should I put this in one of my decks? You can iterate through that and just have something interesting to look through and sort of talk about. All right, it's been a moment. Thank you very much for joining. Once again, hit those buttons if you enjoyed it. Hit me up with suggestions if you have any, and thanks for watching. All right, bye.